Bitcoin is the victor.
I mean, that's part of the bull case for Bitcoin.
If you're not paying attention, you probably should.
The reason for that is because nobody wants to think of themselves as a dependent.
Right.
Children are dependents, right? Even when you fill out your taxes, how many dependents do you have? Are you a dependent or are you an adult, right? Are you a child or are you an adult? So you can almost use this as if you don't take care of your own keys, if you don't memorize your own password, you're a digital child, right? Mommy and daddy are going to store your password for you, and they're going to either let you have it or not. And who wants to be a child? Are you a child? Right? So you can almost kind of politely ridicule somebody for just wanting to be a child. Right. Grow up.
Bully people into the into the sovereign stack.
Grow up. Take control of your stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. Do you see this? Another big theme in the last 2 years, obviously, with the economic lockdowns, people turning away from public schools toward homeschooling pods, and different ways of educating children. I want to live in a world where kids as young as 8-year-olds, as soon as you're able to use a computer, you're learning how to build a sovereign stack at that age, right? That's what we need to get to, in my mind. I got my son in there right now. He's almost 2. I hope by the time he's 10, he's plugging in computers, downloading MSCOS and building his own stack that I don't know about, and with little instruction from myself or navigation help from me. Do we get there? Oh
yeah. Yeah, no, this makes that a lot easier, right? So asking an 8-year-old to, root their MacBook and, start downloading Docker containers and running them and, setting up a Tor network interface and accessing it from a, configured Firefox browser, it's too much. But when you talk about building a sovereign stack, I know you're not just talking about, running self-hosted software. You're talking about the stack of life, right? Taking control of your food and, and your physical protection and your security systems and your digital privacy and all of it. It's the building a sovereign, an individual. And we want that for our children. I do. I just had my first child.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I think about her a lot as we're building this stuff. What kind of future do I want to create for her? And what kind of person do I want her to be? And that informs a lot of our technology. This thought of just wanting my daughter to be a completely free person. Freedom, right? We're talking about really
fundamental,
basic stuff here.
Yeah.
And we can use technology to do that. We can use technology to lower the barrier to entry, right? That's really what we're doing, right? Conceptually, someone were just what does Start9 do, without telling me what Start9 does, right? With any details of the business at all. I would say we're lowering the barrier to entry and shortening the darkness, right? Making sovereign digital technology accessible to people in order to provide an off-ramp from the collapsing system to minimize the damage and darkness that will result from its demise. That's what we're out to do.
Yeah. That's a heavy mission.
It's fun, though, too. I mean, I shouldn't say fun. It's invigorating.
Yes. You wake up excited to go to work every day, I would imagine.
I do.
Yeah.
I don't come home is the problem. I work from home a lot, but I work too much.
I do as well. You can go ask my wife; she'll tell you the same thing. But again, it's worth it. Number one, and number two, I think we were talking earlier. I'm having a black pill day, a bad pill day, but it's true. And I think I really like the way you frame it by we're shortening the darkness. I think my problem and what gives me a sense of existential dread is I always thought that we could avoid the darkness, right? If we could front run it, if we can get Bitcoin in as many hands as possible, if we can make as many people aware of how fucked up the world is as quickly as possible, we can avoid it. We can fix society's problems from falling into a dark place. But I think we are at a point where we do have to resign ourselves. You just have to let the process of decay and entropy of these incumbent systems play their course, and that will come with a bit of darkness. And I really like the framing of shortening that, accepting, number one, that it is coming and it is upon us, and with that acceptance, working to shorten it to as short a period as possible, which I think is a really good framing, as opposed to making the binary we fix it and prevent it, or we just go into complete shit.
Yep. Yeah, and maybe you are right. Maybe we can avoid it. I personally don't.
I think we're already in it.
Yeah. Well, it depends on how you define darkness. How dark is dark need to be before you call it dark? I don't know. But this is not. It's not beautiful out right now, right? It's cloudy at best and storming at worst already. But it's a race. This is where the passion comes from. It's why I'm so passionate about what we're doing, is because I see a ticking clock, right? And again, it's not an overnight thing. It's not like one day it's fine and the next day it's not. As we've seen, it's deteriorating in real time. But we have to build alternative parallel systems as soon as possible so that those who want to exit can exit. We have to build the off-ramps, right? Because you're in a crowded theater that's burning down. Get people out as fast as possible, right? And that's through technology and education. It's how you do that.
Yeah.
And direct assistance, actually helping out, right? Being welcoming to people who want, even if they don't understand exactly what's going on, right? Sometimes that's through willful ignorance, and sometimes it's just through ignorance. Sometimes it's naivety. Sometimes they don't understand how evil some people are.
Yeah, the banality of evil. I mean, you can make a very strong argument that
It's just dull.
a majority of people today are engaged in a somewhat banal form of evil, and they don't even realize it.
Yeah. So, I think in my mind, my personal experiences, I think I pivoted from avoid the darkness to shorten the darkness in 2012.
Why 2012?
Ron Paul.
Okay. What did Uncle Ron say?
Well, it's what he didn't accomplish.
He didn't win the
I at that time had never felt more connected to a real movement in my life. And I was young. It's not like I had a ton of years to have ever been connected to anything, but I was like, this is real, right? I was at those rallies. The Ron Paul 2012 revolution was real. Like it was an intellectual movement. It was backed by logic. It was backed by fact. It wasn't just a bunch of empty rhetoric. He had a plan that would have worked over many, many, many decades.
He was crushing the debates, too.
He was crushing the debates. He was rallying tens of thousands of people who was chanting, "End the Fed." I mean, it was like a real movement, and I was all over it. And I was like, you can't stop something like this. I was like, this thing has wheels and momentum, and there's no way he doesn't get the nomination. And then I watched how they dealt with him. And I think that's proper wording, because he was dealt with. Like a child is dealt with, okay? Like, it was the most powerful social movement I had ever seen, was basically flicked off the table through a very simple tactic of obscurity. They basically just pretended like he didn't exist.
Yeah, in the media.
And then he didn't exist.
They had the polls where like he would be like first, and they put him like in third position and, on the screen,
they
so
just
people
skipped
like
the name.
Yeah.
In first you have Mitt Romney, and in third you have Michelle Bachmann. Like, who's in second? Like, you just didn't say his name, and I was like, "There's no way that can work. People are not idiots." And then it just worked. It worked beautifully. They just ignored his existence, and he failed to exist. And at that moment, I realized how powerful the incumbent system was, how much power media has over perception. Like, I had read about propaganda. I had read about sort of the way that the state, manages consciousness. But I had never experienced it so intimately. And now we're seeing it again in many different facets, but in one in particular. But it's like, so I switched from, well, you can't beat politics with politics. You cannot beat that system at its own game. It's really good at it. You need something wholly other. And at the time, I had not discovered Bitcoin. Right? This was 2012. I was using excess money from my paychecks to buy gold. Because Ron Paul was, I learned about sound money, and I didn't know anything about Bitcoin at the time. And so I was out there buying gold and silver, I had this thesis that the monetary system, I had all the understanding
fundamentals,
of it. Yeah. But I wasn't a dev at the time. I was a late in life programmer. I hit it hard when I did, and now I'm quite good and been doing it for 7 years. But at the time, I didn't know how to code, and I hadn't discovered Bitcoin. I was pretty depressed. Like, there was a couple years that went by there where I was just like, it's over. The darkness is coming. There's no way out. And then I found the angle. I was like, I found Bitcoin. I found coding, which I took to and love. And I was just like, oh, this is the underbelly. Like, this is where they're vulnerable. And it's going to be a long story. I remember talking to, some friends of mine who were getting me into coding and Bitcoin. 2015 is when I started really, seeing both. And they were talking about this as just like, oh, this thing's just going to like come in and just like crush the financial system. And it's going to be over in like 5 years, we'll be on a Bitcoin standard. And I was like, this sounds like a 70-year war.
70?
It sounds like a 70-year war. This sounds like a multi-generational task. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be hiatuses, that there won't be moments of, the eye of the storm, being calm, and feelings of battles. There will be battles that will be short-lived. But I think to actually overturn the system that is currently in existence is going to take multiple generations. And the reason I say that is not because of the technology. It's not because of the protocols and systems that are in place. It's because of the minds. You cannot change the mind of a 50-year-old person, 60-year-old person, 7-year-old person. You can't even change the mind of a 25-year-old person anymore. You have to get them young.
Yeah.
Right? This is about the children. And it's so cliche to say that, but now that I have one, it like is really starting to hit home. It's like we cannot create the world that we want to exist without 2 generations of children at least.
No, I agree, completely agree.
Right? It was Lenin who I think pioneered that statement. Give me 2 generations of children and I'll give you a nation of communists.
Yeah.
Yeah, give me 2 generations of children and I'll give you a nation of sovereign individuals. It won't be a nation though anymore. It'll just be sovereign individuals. But you do need those multi-generations.
I agree. And if you think like Bitcoin is a multi-century, potentially millennia age project where it's going to extend itself and be around far longer than we are on this planet. Yeah, I mean, it's almost selfish to want everything out of the box from Bitcoin for our generation, right? Like, there's no way you could. Yes, it would be incredible, and that's like my biggest beef with Bitcoin's lazy critics and even some Bitcoiners as well is that it's not a medium of exchange, unit of account, it's got volatility. It's like you're not going to get that out of the box, and nor are you going to win out of the box. It's going to take work, it's going to take building, and it's going to take time. And you just, as a Bitcoiner, as an individual out there, maybe listening to this podcast or wanting to usher in a Bitcoin standard, you have to resign yourself to the possibility that it doesn't happen until after you're gone. And that's okay.
Yeah, it is. There's a little bit of a sadness to it. There's a little bit of a sadness to me when I think about that. But it did change when I had my daughter. It wasn't as sad. It was, I don't know, different emotion.
I know. I can't articulate it either, but I know the emotion you're just trying to describe.
I tear up at the thought of her and her children being free. Yeah. It's not even about me anymore. It is so much lower time preference than that. And I couldn't viscerally experience that until I had a kid.